Okay, now to a more serious topic here. We have to discuss how to handle transparency when we go to print our Illustrator files. Now, to get this to work here, we have to throw in a little bit of transparency in our file here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and place my galaxy one more time here. There it is. Very lovely. And I'll take my galaxy and I'm going to move it behind my original lost text, which you'll have down below your page in your Illustrator file. So I just drop it behind it there. I moved it to the back just by hitting Control-Shift open square bracket or Command-Shift open square bracket on the Mac. And I'll take my text here and I'm going to do a couple of quick things here. This is not related to printing with transparency, but we want to set this up just a little bit here. The first thing that I'll do is I will ungroup this object here, Control-Shift-G, Command-Shift-G on the Mac, and using my pathfinders, just like we did before, my shape mode here, I will add and then expand. Now I have something like this happening, very lovely. If you want, you can throw on some other effects. You can increase your stroke weight if you want, whatever you'd like. It doesn't really matter, something like this. And then using my appearance palette, what I'm going to do is target my fill and then throw on an opacity just on the fill. So maybe something like 50%. And this is just kind of a quick example of, again, some neat effects that you might want to try and get with text and other objects. But to the serious side of Illustrator now, I want to know, because I've used transparency here, I want to know how is this going to print when I send this to my service provider. So if you have any extra palettes sitting on your screen, you can move them back over to the right-hand side. And I'm going to go and open up my Flatten Preview palette. So I'm going to go to my Window menu and look for Flatten Preview. Here he is. This little guy here is going to show me how my document will look when it's flattened. Now, what do you mean by flattened? Well, here's what we'll do. Inside my palette here, I'm going to go to my palette menu and I'll go Detailed Preview. And then I'll click on Refresh. And I can see the three objects inside my Illustrator file. Here's the other thing I want to do. I want to expand this palette. So click on this little double-headed arrow once, twice. There it is. You want to have all of your options available. And what I'll do is I'll zoom in on my transparent object. As a matter of fact, you can use your space bar here. I'm just dragging around inside here. You can use your zoom. I can hold down Alt or Option to zoom out, this sort of thing. So it's almost like having a little navigator inside your Flattener Preview palette. Now, from my highlight menu, I'm going to choose Transparent Objects. In other words, I want Illustrator to show me what objects in my artwork are using transparency. And it does so by using this sort of red overlay here. So it's telling me that this text here is transparent. Now, what I could do is I could use my rasters and vectors slider to determine how much of my artwork is going to be vector and how much of my artwork is going to be raster. In other words, PostScript printers can't technically print transparency. So Illustrator kind of fakes it by rasterizing content. So I can choose how much rasterization I want to have happen with my vector objects. So, for example, I could drag my slider all the way down to the raster side. In other words, I could rasterize my entire object, and that's going to guarantee that everything will print out just fine. And by the way, when you make a change, you'll have to click on your refresh button and, unfortunately, zoom back in and pan around a little bit to see how things are going to turn out. So I could rasterize the entire file. That's going to make my Illustrator document pretty large, which means it's going to take a while to print, but I'll know that it's going to print out perfectly. But usually a 50-50 split between vectors and rasters is going to be good enough. And by the way, if a lot of this is sort of over your head and you're kind of scratching your head going, oh, good Lord, I have to figure all this stuff out, really this is usually left up to your printer. So if you want, you can just kind of skip over this stuff and don't really worry about it too much. They'll set everything up for you. However, one final thing that I will mention is I can set my line art and text resolution here, 300 ppi, or maybe it's going to be a low resolution, maybe something I'm going to use on a website, or maybe my service provider requires a higher resolution here for my raster objects. So again, every time I make a change, I have to refresh here. You'll also see an object there for your gradient and gradient mesh resolutions. I can convert all text to outlines if I want. I can convert all strokes to outlines. And I can also clip some complex regions. That will help my document print faster as well. Now, the icing on the cake is if you do know what you're doing inside your Flattener Preview, and you have things looking good here with your lost text or whatever it is that you might have here, The great thing is that InDesign recognizes and respects all of these settings. So in other words, I could take this artwork that I've painstakingly created here in Illustrator, drop it into InDesign, and InDesign recognizes all of my flattening that I've set up here. In any regard, there's a look at your Flatten Preview panel there. Again, it was underneath the window menu. And there's a look at working with opacities and opacity masks and all kinds of other fun things to do, fun effects and so forth, inside Illustrator CS3.